Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Going to be stepping in today to teach, which I'm very excited about because today is a very fun topic for me. But it's good to see you all. I hope everyone had just the most chill weekend. Hope you got to, um, sort of absorb some of that learning, but also process it, but also rest. Rest is so important. I always tell myself that my favorite debugger is my brain when I'm out on a walk. So if you're finding yourself stuck or frustrated, remember, everybody gets stuck. So, are we excited, or is it just me, for what we'll be learning today? Because today we're going to be covering CSS Colors. And I'm no expert myself, but I find color theorying so fascinating, and I'm excited to learn about that along with all of you. So before we hop into that, I just want to know how is the learning going? How is applying this knowledge going? And in the meantime, let's do a little housework before we start. So if you're tuning in for the first time, hi. My name is Carmen. Etta, Jess, and I are teaching this free web development bootcamp. If you're tuning in for the first time, don't worry. There's all of this is recorded, and you can absolutely catch up. By joining this bootcamp live and in all of our other areas, please know that you are agreeing to abide by our code of conduct. If you go to badwebsite.club/code-of-conduct, you can find everything there. In summary, please behave in a way that is constructive and exemplary to other learners. And if you see anything out of sorts, just let us know, please. You can follow the schedule for this bootcamp at badwebsiteclub/bootcamps/spring-2026. Join us on Discord. This is for the free Codecamp Discord channel, but we have a bootcamp-discussion channel in there. Here's the link. And finally, like I said, all of this is recorded. You can find it on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@badwebsiteclub. I am very behind on updating our playlist. That's on me, but I'll get on that. Do you know what? I'm going to challenge myself to do it right after this lesson. So let's see what people are feeling about colors. So we're seeing, I like color theory, but I'm terrible for remembering terms and what they mean. That's totally fine. Remember, what we're learning here is exposure. We are exposing ourselves to these concepts so that we can sort of come back to them later when we're like, oh yeah, there was something about tertiary colors and stuff like that. I'm so behind still on HTML. You can't spell, you are not behind. Let me say that again. You are not behind. There is no timetable. There is no schedule other than the live sessions, but remember, you can catch up on them. This is supposed to be a self-paced bootcamp. So please, 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 don't worry. So let's see what else people are feeling here. Ooh, if you can look into color grading a little bit, as in photos and videos, it helps a lot to get the terms ingrained. No idea what color grading is, so I'm excited to learn about it. Okay, well, that is enough of my blabbling. How about we take a look at CSS colors? We have a lot to a lot to cover today. And I'm going to breeze through all of this stuff. I'm going to remind you of what your really big takeaway should be from today, which is going to be not as much as you thought, but it's still good, as I keep saying, to be exposed, to be to find yourself, oh yeah, so that's what that is. And remember, you don't need to fully, deeply understand it. So let's work with colors in CSS and a little bit of color theory. Now, we're going to start with looking at what primary colors are, which are these three: yellow, blue, and red. And believe it or not, most screens, most LCD stuff, even back in the day with CRT or cathode ray tubes, this is all combinations of, wait, that's not a primary color. Red, blue, and green. Disregard what I said. Yellow, blue, and red are primary colors. Secondary colors, which are mixtures of the primary colors, give us green, orange, and purple. And finally, we have tertiary colors, which are combining a primary color with a secondary color. Yellow, green, blue, violet. I want to say one thing, by the way. My family and I at home often argue about what is and what isn't blue and green. And there's this really fun game. I think it's called Is It Blue or Green? Let me see if I can find it. Is my blue your blue? I'm going to send this. If you ever want to just like argue with other people about what is green or what is blue, super fun. Cool. So aren't the primary colors when considering computers either RGB or CMYK? Well, green isn't a primary color, is it? Green is a combination of two primary colors, which is red and yellow. So while red and blue are definitely primary colors, green is not. CMYK, which I believe is used more for printers, is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And I always say sneak out loud, or smike. Anyway, cool. Let's move on. So that's tertiary colors. Then we have classifications of warm and cool colors. So like shades of red, orange, brown tend to be cool, whereas cool colors like blues, greens, and purples are cool colors, calmness, serenity, and professionalism. I would like to take a small detour here and remind you that these are very Western applications of this theory of warm and cool colors. And don't have it in front of me right now. However, it's in different cultures, green, which here means go ahead, means all good, can mean something alarming. Red can be a positive thing. Do you want to know a fun fact? Up until the late 19th century, blue was the color for girls and pink was the color for boys. And the reason for that was that blue was serene, calm, pure, like a girl, and pink was a softer shade of red, which is the sign of which is the color of masculinity. And that changed in the around the 20th century. So, fun fact. So, next thing we have is the color wheel. Color wheel lets us look at a bunch of shades of colors, and it's usually something that we use as a tool to help us figure out which color we pick. Something to bear in mind here is that it also allows us to pick from a range of color. What is the new meanings of pink and blue? I don't know. I just knew what it was in the past. So another thing that we use day to day are color schemes. So we usually use color schemes, especially when coming up with designs, to pick a set of colors for example, our website. And this color scheme can be made up of one or more sets of colors. So we can have, for example, analogous color schemes, which are adjacent to each other in the color wheel. This means that they're close to each other or next to each other on the color wheel. Different shades of red, for example. Complementary ones usually tend to be on opposite ends of the color wheel relative to each other. Let me bring up an example because it's quite fun. Complementary colors wheel. Oh, yeah. Let me see if this is the website I want. Bear with me, folks. No, that's, oh, is it? Yes, it is. Check it out. So here's a tool called RGB Color Picker. If you're curious, I will link it here. So here's our main color and here's our complementary color. Remember, they are opposites of each other along the color wheel. So if you look at it here at the bottom, we have our color wheel, red all the way back to red, right? And if I move my color here, check it out. The complementary color changes to be the equivalent on the opposite side of the color wheel, right? So if I'm here along purple, you can see, let me just make it pure purple, that the complement is here. Blue, the complement's yellow. Red, the complement is blue, it's on the other side, and so on and so forth. So yes, that's complementary colors. And then we have triadic color schemes, which are approximately the same distance from one another, right? So if they're connected, they kind of make like a triangle on the color wheel. And finally, we have monochromatic, which looks like this. We're picking a color and, sorry, it is warm today, as always. Right, we're picking a single color and having a color scheme made up of different shades of that color. As always, for me, the biggest priority is to think of what is the most accessible while still being the most me. So for example, on my website, I like to be a little bit monochromatic and stick to lavender or violet. No, don't link my website. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Etta. Thank you. So let's do a little bit of quizzing here. Why is color theory important for web development? It's not important because it has no impact on user experience. It helps designers visually create appealing websites. It's only important for print design, or it's irrelevant to modern web design trends. So what do we think? Do I like jazz? I don't know. Yeah, I like jazz. Okay, so we see number 2. Thank you very much. Which color scheme is most likely to create cohesive and soothing experiences? Analogous, complementary, monochromatic, or triadic? What do we think? Oh, Bee Movie. I've actually never seen the Bee Movie. I just know the meme. Mel, I also struggled with these. Don't worry. And Eloado, I love what you're saying this here. This is so subjective, and I agree wholeheartedly. Okay, people are saying monochromatic. Thank you very much. And finally, we have the concept of color harmony refers to using only one color in a design, combining colors that clash with each other, creating visually effective color combinations, or the brightness or darkness of a color. What do we think? People are saying number 3. Okie dokie. So we'll check our answers, and we have unanswered questions or incorrect ones. Aha. So incorrect. So monochromatic is incorrect. Think about the emotional impact of colors placed adjacent to each other. And yes, the notes say analogous. Let's check our answer, which looks good. Pat ourselves on the back. Pat, pat. I do still think that this can be highly subjective. Like I said, mine is relatively, my website, for example, is very monochromatic, but everybody has different preferences. That's why we literally have people who, for example, prefer high contrast designs. So we got a question here. Do you find that web design tends to follow the general design style of the time, so as things tend to be more minimalist / monochrome with one standout color? Web design now is similar I, I'm not an expert on design, so to speak. With app and web design, I definitely noticed, I think I was talking about this last week, the change from a more skeuomorphic design, back when, for example, iOS tend to look more like real objects. I remember the podcasts app in particular looking like a cassette player. So I think the more important thing here is going to be accessibility rather than what is trendy. I see a lot of young folks now making fun of the sort of like millennial, those multicolored soft designs for like enterprise with the little people doing things. So it changes. And yes, if you are colorblind, the answer is different. I'm wearing monochromatic. I kind of am, aren't I? Fun fact, I crocheted this myself. Yeah, so yes, that's color theory. Now we're going to move on to named colors. So one thing to note about named colors is that we've actually been using them for quite a while now. Let me bring up the named colors. These are quite a few that you'll see on your browser. Let me bring up a bunch of colors. So check it out. There's standard colors: black, silver, gray, maroon, fuchsia, yellow, aqua. In addition to these 16 colors, there's about 150 other colors. If Jess were here, she would tell us the story of, I think it's like Rose. Is it Rose? Misty Rose or Rosa? There's one that's named after a person. It has a tragic backstory or a touching backstory. I can't remember what it is. I'm going to ask Jess to come in and tell us. Rebecca Purple. Rebecca Purple. There's a story behind it. Etta knew. Thank you. What is my favorite? My favorite is either lavender. As you can tell by my website, I love lavender. Or I love violet, named after my middle name, Violeta. My favorite colors. Yes. So the thing about named colors, a Dwarf Fortress fan. Carmen, stay on topic. Yes, named colors. So the thing about them is you probably, if you've taken a look at other websites or if you've been like working on any projects, is you don't see a lot of them, right? This used to be because different browsers would have their own opinion of what turquoise is. See, the game is my blue, your blue. But also, people want to have their own like adjustments to those colors. So you won't actually see a lot of named colors out in the wild. And even when preferring to do things like black or white, they still prefer to just write them out in other writing conventions. So let's do some Q&A. What is a key benefit of using named colors in CSS? Named colors allow us to create gradients. Named colors are simpler to write and make code more readable. Named colors provide a wider range of color options than hex codes. Named colors are the most precise way to define colors in web design. So what do we think it is? Number 2. That's absolutely right. Next, in what scenario might named colors not be the next best choice? When you need to quickly prototype a design, when your design requires a very specific or nuanced shades of color, when your design involves only primary colors, or when collaborating with others on a simple project. So what do we think the answer to that is? It is once again 2. Thank you very much. Next, which of the following is an example of a named color in CSS? We've got FF5733, RGB 25591, the 9971. Tomato, did not know tomato was a color, or HSL 120, 100%, or 150? And people are saying tomato. Let's check our answer. Looks good. Pat, pat. Thank you, everyone. And let's move on to RGB. Now, RGB is going to be the most, I would say, the most fundamental part of working with colors in all of programming, because it's something that's been around for a long while. Not to mention, as I mentioned earlier, that pretty much all screens are displayed with a combination of red, green, and blue, which is what RGB stands for, right? So when writing RGB in CSS, what we're doing is, instead of explicitly stating a color, blue, cyan, Rebecca purple, and so on and so forth, what you want to do instead is have how much red, how much green, and how much blue. So this is done with a function. Remember, we saw functions a week or so ago when we were looking at gradients. So the function is called RGB, brackets, because it's a function, and it takes 3 arguments or parameters. I might mix up the word for the two. I think I'm going to go with parameters. So this takes 3 parameters. The first one is a value between 0 and 255 for how much red. The second one, 0 to 255 for green. And the third one is value from 0 to 255 for blue. The higher the number, the more intense the color, the amount of that color. Now, one thing to bear in mind, how on earth am I supposed to remember 255? The answer is you're probably not supposed to, but I'm going to share with you why. 0 to 255 represents an 8-bit number. Is that right? I think so. Yes. 2 to the power of 8, right? In this case, a value in binary, zeros and ones, that goes from 0 to 2 to the power of 8, which is 256. So that range is of 256 numbers. The reason it's done like this because of how old compilers and memory banks could store those numbers. It was the easiest way to do so. I'm not going to do the math right now for how many color combinations there are, but there's a lot. So some short ways of writing colors. Black is with all zeros. White is represented by all 255s. And red is represented, for example, with 255, no green, and no blue. So here we have an example of using RGB. And this can be used anywhere we use colors. This can be the font color, background color, gradients, border colors, and so on and so forth. And that gives us red. This is probably going to be the most, as I said, fundamental part of using colors in CSS, but we're going to see how we're actually going to be writing them later on. There is a second function called RGBA, which takes the 3 color parameters and then a value between 0.0 and 1.0 for the opacity. The opposite of opacity is transparency. The higher the opacity, the more opaque, or the less see-through. So this color, for example, is pure blue with a 0.5 opacity. That means it's 50% transparent. Hard to see. Actually, why make it hard to see if we can make it easy to see? Give me a sec. Let me try something else. What if we make the background color that, and the color will make RGBA 0, 0, 255, 0.75. So the color of the text should be the same blue, but less transparent. You see? So it's still legible. I wouldn't use this. It's bad accessibility. So it's still legible because it's less transparent. It's more opaque. And yeah, you're probably going to be using RGB most of the time, but it's good to also be aware of RGBA, particularly when working with backgrounds. So all of that said, what do the numbers in RGB represent? Width, height, and depth, red, green, and blue, padding, margin, and border sizes, or the amount of hue, saturation, and lightness? What do we think? People are saying number 2. That is correct. Thank you. Which CSS function would you want if you want to use the control the transparency of a color? I would highly recommend also getting comfortable with the term opacity. So we have RGB, RGBA, HSL, or hex. And again, notice the brackets, the smooth brackets. The smooth brackets tell us that these are functions. And you're going to be seeing those a lot in your programming journeys. So yes, the answer is 2, RGBA, because we want to add the A stands for alpha channel, which again is how much transparency, how much opacity. So what is the maximum value for any individual color, parentheses? Yes. What did I say? Sorry. What is the maximum value for any individual color in the RGB model? There's either 100, 50, 255, and 360. And people are saying 255. That is correct. Thank you very much. Let's check our answers. There we go. Pat, pat. Now, time for my arch nemesis. Next up is hue, saturation, and lightness, HSL. Now, this is another way of defining colors in CSS. I'm going to tell you all straight up. It is extremely rare when I see HSL colors. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen one in the wild. Nevertheless, it's good to understand the concept, especially if you're into color theory and design stuff. So again, it is a function, just like CSS, that takes 3 arguments. Hue, which is where on the color wheel we are, right? So like, remember, between red and just before red, along the whole color wheel, that's the hue. Saturation is the intensity of that color, right? Like how pure that color is. And then there's the lightness, which is how much light is shown onto the color. Waddle's asking, why is it your arch nemesis? I think it's really convenient in combination with RGB in all kinds of digital art. Waddle, legit, 100%. The reason it's my arch nemesis is because I don't work a lot with design and colors. I always forget what HSL is. And I feel like every time I change a value thinking I'm going to do it correctly, it goes off in a different color. And I'm like, do you know the meme with the old meme with the dog being like, I have no idea what I'm doing? That's me with HSL. Yes. Now, the values are taken in 3 different parameters: hue, saturation, and lightness. But the units are different as well. So for the hue, remember, it's where along the color wheel we are, from 0 to 360 degrees, right, on a circle. The saturation is a percentage from 0, no, like completely no color, to 100%, which is the most vibrant form of that color. And lightness, just like saturation, is how much light. So if we put 0%, it's going to be purely black. 50% will give us the regular shade, and 100% will give us white. Now, one big difference between RGB and HSL is that RGB, the parameters are comma separated. What does that mean? Let me go back to RGB real quick. Where's RGB? There. Red, comma, green, comma, blue. In HSL, it's hue, space, saturation, space, lightness. Now, some of you might be wondering, why on earth? I don't know. My guess is that this was probably added either in a hurry or perhaps not working together with the folks. Oh, they can? Sorry. Is that it was made in a different design committee and they didn't coordinate on what the signature of that function should be. Mel's saying it can be comma separated too, but it's the old way. That's so interesting and frustrating at the same time. Yeah, see? Which is still supported by browsers. Cool. Instead of working with examples here, I actually want to play around with this. Because as Eduardo said, it's best done with sliders. So the first one, remember, is the hue. So anywhere along, okay, Edda, I don't know how you copied my color so quickly. That was impressive. Thank you. Right. So from 0 to 360 degrees, where along the color wheel we are. Then we have saturation, or how intense that color is. The higher the percentage, the more intense that color. And as we slide down, it goes all the way down to a more, I don't want to say dull, but like dulled color. So gray, right? And then there's lightness, which remember is how much light. 0% light gives us black and 100% gives us white. So that's HSL, but there's one more thing to bear in mind, which is how do we do the alpha channel? And one key difference between HSL and RGB is that the signature is hue, space, saturation, space, lightness, / alpha. And again, if you're asking why, I have no idea why on earth that is, but the unit is the same. So from 0 to 1, 0.0 to 1.0. The higher the value, the higher the opacity. If it annoys you, as it does Mel, we also have comma separated, but it's more old. Oh, wait, sorry, that is the HSLA function, which does do it with commas. It is, however, a legacy equivalent. So I'm usually loath to say do this or do that, but to be on the safe side, if you're going to be using HSL, stick with the spaces way of doing it. So questions and answers. What does the first value in HSL represent? Saturation, lightness, hue, or opacity? What do we think? Hue, thank you very much. Next up is which percentage value for lightness would result in a pure white when using the HSL model? Remember, the lightness is how much light is coming out of that color, is being shone on that color. So either 0%, 50%, 100%, or 25% to have white. Yep, people are saying 100%. That is correct. How would you make color semi-transparent using the HSL model or function? We have by using HSL with a / separator and an alpha value, by lowering the lightness value in the HSL function, by increasing the hue value above 360 degrees, or by setting the saturation value to 0%. And people are saying number 1, that is correct. So our answers are good. Pat, pat. And we'll move on. For hex codes. So this is going to be the one that I recommend sticking the most with. Most websites that you're going to be working with, most projects you're going to be working with are going to be representing colors in their CSS using hexadecimal codes. In fact, when you saw me playing around with this color picker, you probably picker. Sorry. You probably saw that it was generating this color here, usually represented with the hashtag. And the hashtag is going to be the most common way you see of representing colors in CSS. So what is hexadecimal colors? Hexadecimal is a way of representing numbers. We use a decimal system, 0 to 9, to represent numbers. And when we go above 9, we add a digit. So 10 is 1, 0. Binary goes from 0 to 1. And when we want to add a digit for 2, we add a digit. 1, 0 represents the number 2. So hexadecimal goes up to has 16 values that can be represented for a number from 0 to F. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but we don't have 10. So the number 10 is represented by the letter A, 11 is B, 12 is C. I got this. 13 is D, 14 is F, and 14 is E, and 15 is F. And then 16 is represented by 1, 0. Again, because of how numbers are represented in computers, you're going to commonly see hexadecimal values. Math is not my strong suit. That's why I'm a programmer. Irony. So yeah, because of the way numbers are represented in computers, because remember, computers mostly work in binary or 8-bit, 16-bit. You'll see those kinds of values. That's why you commonly see hexadecimal as a representation. Hexadecimal also allows us to represent a two-digit hexadecimal number, lets us represent from 0, which is 00 in hexadecimal, to 255, which is FF, right? FF in hexadecimal is F, which is 15, plus 15 times 16. No, I can't do math. Why am I doing this to myself? Oh, Ed, are you helping me? 240. Thank you, Ed. She's the best. 240 plus 15 is 256. 255, pardon me. And that convenience allows us to write, instead of 255, 255, 255, that just allows us to write each value as 2 digits. Now, what's cool about this is that instead of writing RGB 255, 255, 255, this is a shorthand for the RGB function. The first 2 digits represent how much red, from 0 to 255. The second 2 digits represent how much green, from 0 to 255. And the last 2 represent how much blue, 0 to 255. So with all of them set to 0, we're going to get black. And from all of them set to F, we're going to get white. So any place where you want to use a color, and trust me, folks, you're going to see this a lot. This is the way to use hexadecimal colors in CSS. You don't need a function. You just need hashtag and the 6 numbers. So for example, here, our H1 is 255 red, 57 orange, 57 green, 33 blue. If we scroll down, we can see orangish, very red with all of that red in there. Our P element here, 40C, AF for green, and 50 for blue, which gives us a greenish color. And one thing to bear in mind, let me scroll down here a bit. Yes, when you have values that are repeated, for example, instead of writing 6 Fs, you can, and I don't think Mel's a fan of this, shorten it to 000. Sorry, FFF. So FFF is the same as FFF, FFF. And this works for any of them. This is a shorthand that you do sometimes see. I haven't seen it that much, except for showing that it's possible to do. Oh, wait, do they show the opacity here? No. Cool. Let me show you one thing. Let me just make this FFFFF. I think I briefly covered this last week. You can add 2 more digits to your hexadecimal color to add the opacity. Instead of bringing from 0.0 to 1.0, it's again from 0 to 255. So if you want full opacity, you add FF. Cool. If you want 50% opacity, what is half of 15? What is half of 255? 127. Okay, whatever. You can make it like 99. And look. It's more transparent. 7F. Y'all are so smart. 7F. Thank you. And you can see this way, it's 50% transparent. Yeah, so this is something you'll see often as well. And again, offers a shorthand for writing colors. So what does each pair of colors in a hex code represent? Amount of opacity, intensity of red, green, or blue, the amount of contrast, or the lightness and saturation of the color. Mel, I'll get to your question as well. I know you've got a couple questions there. So what do we think here? What do the pair of characters mean? They mean either opacity, amount of red, green, or blue, the contrast between colors, or the lightness and saturation. It's cool to guess. Number 2, thank you very much. How would you write the hex code for black using the shorthand format? We have 000, 0000000. This is fun. FFF or FFF. Remember, this is for black. One or two, but it wants one. Yeah, I mean, this is the shorthandiest we get. Why might a designer choose to use hex codes in their CSS over named colors? Hex codes allow for more precise color selection. Hex codes are easier to remember than named colors. Hex codes automatically adjust for light and dark mode. I shouldn't laugh. These are fun answers. Hex codes do not require any formatting in CSS. Oh, people are so much faster than I. Yep, it's number 1. Check our answers. Looks good. Pat. Oh, we're making good time today. Let me take a moment to answer a couple questions. The first one is, the shorthand confuses me. Do all have to be the same or all pairs? FF446 to F46, but not F14466. Yeah, so they all have to be pairs. So your first example is the correct one, FF4466. I would recommend sticking with the 8 digits, mostly for consistency's sake. I'm a gal that thrives on consistency, and I highly recommend consistency here. Mel, you had another question earlier that I want to answer right now, which is, When you have colors in variables, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I still want to try and answer this. Is it more readable to name the variable with a color name or the thing that color is for? For example, grassy green or secondary button color. And here I'm going to recommend using, when you're using a CSS color to denote a utility, then you're going to go with a utilitarian name of the color. Why? For example, if you have CSS that adapts to dark and light mode, having a color called grassy green, but is dark green in dark mode, isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. So I would recommend going with secondary button color. But we'll cover CSS variables very soon. We have one more session here, which is linear and radial gradients. Now, the good news is we've already covered this in a previous lesson, but still good to see how they can be used elsewhere, especially given that now we have lots of different ways of writing colors. In this example, we see, I'm glad too, Mel, a background of a div said to have a linear gradient to the right that goes from red to blue. That's using named colors. Now we know that if we type FF0000, it's not going to change because red and FF0000 are equivalent. So we can also define which direction the gradient moves in. For example, here we have a gradient that goes from red to yellow to blue towards the right. So it starts at red on the left, moves to yellow, then to blue. But we can change the direction, make it to the left, and I will refresh because I need to refresh. So to left, now it's flipped. Don't make fun of me. It's hard to talk for an hour. To the top goes from red at the bottom, yellow in the middle, red at the top. To the bottom, red at the top, yellow in the middle, blue at the bottom. We also have radial gradients. So here we have a circle radial gradient that goes from red to blue. Starts at red in the center, moves out to be blue outside. We can also position our gradient using things like ellipse at the top left. So you can see it's up here. That goes from red to blue. Can we add more colors? Absolutely. Circle at top left is more circular. Bottom left, bottom right. I like what Mel's saying. I ended up playing a game trying to guess how the gradient was made before looking at the CSS. That's actually really handy practice. Somebody should make a game about that. And finally, we can also use percentages of how much of the gradient, how much of the div is going to be occupied by that color. So red for 20%, yellow for 40%, and blue for 80%. You don't see a lot of gradients these days, but they can also be handy for doing things like transparency. So making a color fade out. Actually, I want to try that. Yeah. Can I do that? So no, that's white, isn't it? Can I explain more regarding how the color stops work? Absolutely. Let me just play around with one thing because I want to see how this works with opacity. So FF00007, was it C? Yes. So check it out. Still red, but it fades out. Actually, completely transparent. So it goes from purely red to a fully transparent red. So can I please explain more regarding how color stops work? I went through the resources online, but didn't yet understand. Sure. This creates a gradient where red takes up the first. I'm still going to try, Eldorado. So let's start with a less complicated gradient. Blue. So in this gradient, it's pure red until 20% of the way through the div. And then the rest just fades into blue as expected. Does that make sense? Like just at that point, does that make sense? P.S. I'm going to be fully honest. I forget what the color stops do every time, and I figure it out on the go, which is what I'm doing right now. And I'll tell you why I forget. I never use them. I never use the color stops. But Abyss Walker, like at that point, do you understand what I'm saying? So there's no specific space meant for blue. Correct. Pure 255 blue is only at the very start, right? But the first 20%, pure 255 red. We can play around with it. Check it out. Now, 50% of the div is pure red, and the rest of the space is dedicated to gradientize to blue. But what if I put in blue 50%? Check this out. Now, 50% of the div is for red, and 50% of the div is for blue, which means there's no space for gradientization, is, I believe, the technical term. Right? Now, what if I make it 25%? Why is it not doing the thing? Hang on. Do, 25%. That doesn't work, does it? Okay, ignore. 10%. Okay, see, I've already forgotten how this works. Linear gradient CSS. Can I give you some advice, all of you, regarding the color stops? And I say this with all the love in the world. You are not gonna remember on the first try how to get it right. And I'm sorry. You're always going to be doing what I'm doing right now, which is looking it up. Okay. So I'm looking at MDN, by the way. Huh? Blue. You can't go backwards with the percents. And we have the silly spaces again. Is it spaces? No. 30% blue, 90%. Okay, let me see. Yeah, listen. It's never gonna be. Color, stop, column. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, friends. I don't fully understand this. I never have. Sometimes it clicks and I'm like, oh, I'm a genius, and then it goes away. Abyss Walker, I need to know, do you feel that I've satisfactorily answered your question? If not, I would like to move on. Edda very kindly posted, the linear gradient documentation on MDN. I know that this is annoying, and I know I keep saying this, but you don't always need to fully understand a thing. It might be helpful to play around with it until you do, and it is nice to have control over your gradients, but frankly, I very rarely find myself doing so. But I'm only going to move on if I have permission. In the meantime, because we're running out of time, oh, thank you. I understood that I need to experiment with multiple values to understand, and then I will forget until I use it often. Yeah, pretty much. Sorry that I know that's not the most, how do I put this, authoritative way to put it, but I gotta be honest with y'all. Anyway, let's do some Q&A and then go do some homework. So linear gradients only use, what is the difference between linear and radial gradients in CSS? First one is linear gradients only use 2 colors, while radial gradients use multiple colors. Linear gradients transition along a straight line, while radial gradients radiate from a central point. That felt like a tongue twister. Linear gradients are only horizontal, while radial gradients can be any shape. And linear gradients are smoother than radial gradients. This really feels like a tongue twister. So what's the answer? Difference between linear and radial gradients. Number 2, thank you very much. In the following code, what does 45 degrees specify? So linear gradient, 45 deg, red and blue. So we have the angle of rotation for the entire element, the direction of the gradient line, the size of the gradient, and the distance between color stops. What do we think? People are saying number 2 again. Thank you. And finally, which of the following is not a valid way to specify direction in a linear gradient? To right, to bottom left, 90 degrees, or diagonal? Gosh, we've been covering a lot today. Yep, correct. It is diagonal. Let's check our answers and we're good. Pat, pat. We did it, friends. So we've covered everything here. So the other homework was to go through the colored markers workshop. If you have any questions, now's the time. We've got the lab of colored boxes, and then review and take the quiz for CSS Colors. For tomorrow, we'll be starting with styling forms. So we'll be doing best practices for styling text inputs, appearance, when to use appearance none to deal with issues styling search inputs and checkboxes, and common issues when styling special inputs elements. And then we'll have the workshop of designing a registration form and the lab for the contact form. And that's it, everybody. Hope this was helpful. Color stops get me every time, and I apologize that I make it look like it's impossible to learn. It is totally possible to learn. It is probably also possible to fully understand it, but it's something that comes up so rarely that if you need it, I'm sure you can pick it up. It is sorcery. I like that. The color markers confused me when they added the sleeve. Since it was on top of the gradient, I'd forgotten that there was a they were setting a background with the inner elements on top. Very valid. It's called color theory for a reason. Love it. Well, friends, let's wrap it up for today. Jess will be back tomorrow, and I'm excited to see you again. And I wish you all the best with your continued learning, and very impressed with you all. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.